What's up, Bama Insider Nation? This is Alabama football recruiting with Andrew Bone. My name is Trey Annity. Thank you for joining us tonight. 6 p.m. start tonight. I love it, everybody. Hopefully getting off work, getting on YouTube to join us, Facebook, wherever you're joining us from. Thank you for being here tonight. Hit that like button, guys. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. We got a lot to talk about tonight. It's been an interesting month, a little bit of a slower month for Alabama recruiting, but we have the guru, the man himself, Andrew Bone, to discuss it all tonight. And Andrew, to start it out, I want to talk about a couple of guys that are going to be making their decisions here pretty soon. They've scheduled their decision dates. Elijah Pritchett, the first one, I believe he's Tuesday, September the 28th is when he will be announcing his decision. Jaleel Skinner as well, a little bit later on October the 9th. What's the latest on these guys? Alabama, not having a commitment in about a month now. These could be two big players. What do you see in the crystal ball here?
Yeah, it's great to be back Tuesday night. A lot has changed over the course of the last month and a half for me. As we've been renovating our house for the last 6 months. Finally, just got back into the house. So, the fans who've been watching our regular shows when I'm on it, you usually see the walls covered with Alabama paintings. We're gonna get those back up. I got some new ones that we're gonna post up there here in the next couple of weeks once we kind of get organized here at the house. And got a new baby here at the house as well. So I don't know if he's gonna start screaming here in a second or not. But I hope you guys can look past the blank walls and hopefully we'll get back to normal here pretty soon. But hopefully you can hear me pretty well. But in terms of Alabama football recruiting, things have been kind of slow. Slower than what most people were probably expecting. Once the season kind of got underway. But I posted this on the Bama Insider message boards this morning. The reason that it's slow is just because there hasn't been any big games. A lot of kids are going to these big games, throughout the country, and Alabama just hadn't had any. Now they're going to have one here in next weekend with Ole Miss coming into town. There's going to be a lot of top recruits that are going to be at the game. I also pointed out on our message board that normally I would have never said it's a big game against Ole Miss. We just don't see that too often, but this one is, and a lot of people are going to have their eyes on it. So we're going to see a lot of recruits in Tuscaloosa next weekend. But in terms of guys getting closer to making decisions, we're talking about Elijah Pritchett, who has announced that he's going to make his decision on September the 28th. So that's a week from today. I really like Alabama's chances here. I think with the season, the way it's kind of gone for Florida State, obviously, tough start to the season. Everybody was all excited when Florida State had their close game against Notre Dame. Then they, got beat on that Hail Mary pass by Jacksonville State. Got the brakes beat off of them by Wake Forest this past weekend. So things are just not going well down there. Now, Pritchett took a visit to Georgia this past weekend. I just don't see him going to Georgia. I think it's always been an Alabama Florida State recruiting battle for him, and I think it still is, even though Florida State's having the season that they're having. That said, I do like Alabama's chances. I think he ends up choosing the Tide next week, and that's going to be my prediction, and we'll see if that changes over the course of the next week. But USC was also involved with him. Don't think USC is really much of a contender anymore after Clay Helton was fired last week. But let's move on to Jaleel Skinner. This is another top athlete that Alabama has been recruiting for a long time. He took his official visit to Alabama back in June with his family. It was I think it was June the 18th weekend when he took that official visit, and visited a lot of other schools. Has Florida State, Miami, Clemson, Texas, Alabama. Those are the top schools for Jaleel Skinner. In my opinion, I think he's going to end up going to Alabama. I put in a future cast on Rivals today for Jaleel Skinner to Alabama, and that's not a guarantee, but that's just my prediction the way it is right now. We know what Alabama has on the offensive side of the ball in its recruiting class at this time. You have Amari Niblock, the big 6'4", 230-pound, wide receiver athlete. Alabama, thinks this guy's pretty special. And you also have Elijah Brown, a little bit bigger, 6'5", about 240-pound tight end. So you got two big jumbo athletes already on the offense side of the ball. Skinner's a little bit skinnier than these other two guys. Being about 215 pounds, 220, but he's extremely athletic, can run like a gazelle. He's got great hands, very athletic. Definitely somebody that they can be a mismatch at the tight end position. And Alabama has recruited these jumbo tight ends, or jumbo athletes / tight ends, really well. And I think Skinner has a great relationship with the Alabama coaching staff. They've really turned up the heat on him over the course of the last, I would say, month or so. And I think he's going to end up picking Alabama. I think with Florida State having the season, like I said, they're having, I think they've kind of fallen off a little bit. Clemson seems like they've fallen off. It seems more like Alabama, Texas, and Miami for Jaleel Skinner. But as of right now, I'm going with Alabama for Jaleel Skinner.
Couple of good future casts there if you're an Alabama Crimson Tide fan. The ACC, a couple of schools missing out there as well. But it's just so nice to hear about these visits and to see these kids coming back to campus. We haven't seen that in so long. Two kids we've been tracking for a long time now, Bone. Denver Harris and Berrien Brown, they are going to be making trips, I believe, coming up soon here, but they don't have a commitment date scheduled quite yet. When do you see that going down, and what kind of decision do you think is in their mind at this point?
Yeah, we've been talking about Berrien Brown and Denver Harris for a long time on our Bama Insider YouTube show and on the Bama Insider recruiting board. And we keep thinking that they're going to make these decisions, back in June, we thought it. Back in July, we thought it. August, September. Things have just been kind of stagnant with them the last few months. But with Denver Harris, there was some talk that he was going to make a decision on September 22nd. Doesn't look like that's going to happen tomorrow. It looks like he's probably going to announce maybe a top two. And we think as of right now, and I've kind of felt this way for a while. We've made some posts about it on Bama Insider for the last few months, really since about July, that we felt like that it was an Alabama LSU recruiting battle. Even though he's from the state of Texas and Texas A&M or have been high on his list as well. I think he goes out of state. I think it's Alabama or LSU for Denver Harris, but don't think he's going to commit on Wednesday. But I definitely think that Alabama still is in really good shape for the 5-star cornerback. Now, with Berrien Brown, one of the top wide receivers in the country out of Nashville, Pearl-Con High School, certainly one of the most electric football players in the country. I actually think he's a little bit underrated. Even though he's in the top 100, I think he's at number 53, number 54 overall player. I think this kid's a 5-star. I mean, he has got this unbelievable speed. He's extremely explosive. Definitely somebody that Alabama has heavily recruited for a very long time. This isn't a guy who had to come to camp. This is a guy who has been pressed by Alabama for several months. Right there, number 53 overall in the country there. He's been pretty quiet. He doesn't really talk a lot, doesn't do many interviews, keeps things really tight-lipped. So we thought he was going to commit in August. That's kind of what he said. We talked to him in July briefly, and he said that he was probably going to commit within the month. Decided to hold off. Has taken in some game day visits. I know he's been up to Kentucky, Ole Miss, TCU. Those are all schools that he likes outside of Alabama. But in the end, I still think Alabama's in really good shape for him. I'd be surprised if he ends up going somewhere else. But in terms of when he's going to announce that commitment, we're still kind of waiting. So we'll have to wait and see. I'm sure Berrien Brown's probably going to announce on his social media when that decision is going to happen, rather than us really know what's going on with him, from anywhere else. But he's just that type of guy, just very tight-lipped, but having a great senior season for Pearl-Con. We see his highlights just about every single week, and they're extremely impressive. But this is certainly a guy that Alabama really wants as a part of its recruiting class. And I certainly think that after last year's class at the wide receiver position, they can continue to have a lot of success in this year's recruiting class as well.
I don't know if it gets much better than last year's wide receiving group. I mean, it was loaded all the way around. But like you said, Berrien Brown would be the second wide receiver recruit in this class alongside Kobe Prentice. Two guys Alabama would love to have join this roster. And guys, Andrew Bone will be answering your questions to close out the show tonight. So get in the comments. Let us know what you're thinking. Anything you want to know about, he'll be breaking it down for you later on in the show. But two really talented wide receivers in this group. Is there any other guys in the mix? Alabama is really trying to recruit heavily here. And maybe when do you see them making their trips to campus and making those commitments?
Well, I think anytime you talk about wide receivers, you got to talk about Evan Stewart, 5-star receiver out of Texas his highlight film this season, it's been ridiculous. I mean, this is a guy that has also seen his stock continue to rise throughout the last several months. And I think once people started seeing him and going out to his games and seeing him at various camps, they understood that this is a big time player. And I certainly think that Alabama is a contender. Now, Florida, a lot of people say that Florida is the favorite for him, and he was down in Gainesville this past weekend. I think Florida certainly has a great chance to land him, but he's still going to visit Alabama. Texas is involved. A lot of schools are really involved with him. He's a former Texas commitment, and he's going to take some more visits this fall, take some officials, and then make that decision. So Alabama is certainly a contender in his recruitment. But if I had to pick right now, probably leaning elsewhere, probably leaning more towards Florida. But get them back on campus. That can change a lot of things once you get kids back on campus, especially you get them back on campus for a big game atmosphere, whether that's Ole Miss, LSU, Arkansas. Alabama certainly wanting to get him in town for a big game, the rest of this season. He's not the only guy that they're still recruiting. As we mentioned, Barry Brown, certainly a top guy, but two guys from Louisiana they've heavily pursued for a long time: Shaz Preston and Kendrick Law. Now, Shaz Preston, I feel like Alabama has steadily improved its place with him over the course of the summer, leading up until now. Back in June, I wouldn't have put Alabama as a top contender for him, but he visited in June, then returned for the Champions Cookout in July, and I think Alabama, has just as good of a shot as anybody does with Shaz Preston right now. Even though it says 100% there for LSU, I just think Alabama has a great chance with Shaz, and I think they've certainly been pushing hard for him. Now, he talked to his dad earlier this week. He said he's going to, still going to visit Alabama this fall. Hasn't set up at any commitment dates. Everybody's in Louisiana is still kind of recovering from Hurricane Ida. So once things kind of settle down there, they're going to start setting up some visits and get to some games. But certainly expect him in Tuscaloosa this fall. Most likely for that LSU game. It's kind of the same with Kendrick Law. Kendrick Law, a little bit more on the tight lip side. He doesn't really say a lot. We'd heard some positive things coming out during the summer after his visit to Alabama in June that Alabama had a great chance with him. Now, he kind of plays all over the field. Some schools recruiting him as a running back, some schools recruiting him as a wide receiver. He actually worked out at wide receiver at Alabama's football camp, did really well, and certainly improved his stock, and certainly been a guy that Alabama has been going after for a while. So we're going to watch all of these guys really closely over the course of the next few months. Evan Stewart, Barry Brown, Kendrick Law, Shaz Preston, kind of see what's going to happen with them. But I think Alabama's going to have a chance to land at least probably two of those guys out of the four. But there's another guy that's out there that has Alabama in his top three. That's Luther Burden. Five-star wide receiver, decommitted from Oklahoma, announced the top three just last week: Alabama, Georgia, and Mizzou. Now, I don't think Alabama's really much of a contender here. He visited back in the summer, didn't really spend a lot of time in Tuscaloosa. He was down at Alabama with his high school team for a 7-on-7 camp. The camp got canceled, so Alabama really didn't even get a chance to watch him. And even talking to him after that visit, he said he didn't even get a chance to spending time or meet with Coach Saban. So as of right now, I think this is more of a Georgia, Missouri recruiting battle. So I really wouldn't put him, in that same group with Shaz Preston and Kendrick Law, and Barry Brown and Evan Stewart in terms of guys that Alabama realistically has a chance to sign at this wide receiver position.
That's a lot of names there. And, if they can just land 2-3 of these guys, I think you're feeling really comfortable. Some guys from all over the Southeast there. A guy a little bit closer to home, Justice Finkley, broke some hearts here in the state of Alabama. He committed to the University of Texas. Now, coincidence or not, Isaiah Hastings down in Clearwater, Florida, then received an offer from the University of Alabama. What's the word on Hastings here? And, was this a coincidence now that spot potentially freed up with Finkley committing to the University of Texas?
Well, I think with Alabama, they're always evaluating. They're always, trying to find, different players. There's always going to be guys that are kind of hidden under the rock. You got to go out there and find them. And, we've seen so many hidden gems that Alabama's been able to discover during their senior season. Everybody always thinks just because you get offered during your junior season, or you don't get offered during your junior season, or you don't get offered before your senior season, you're not any good. That's not necessarily the case. There's so many different reasons why people may not have gotten offered. Maybe they didn't maybe they didn't play as a junior. Maybe they didn't have a good highlight film. Maybe they didn't go to any camps. This is a kid that is very intriguing. He's originally from Canada, originally from Toronto. So, we know Alabama's success with players from Canada. So they would love to add another Canadian to its roster. Transferred to Clearwater Academy back in the summer, and decided to play his senior season down there. Starting to get a lot of attention. Alabama, Georgia have offered him in the last week and a half. He's certainly going to try to get up to Alabama this fall. He actually attended the Alabama-Florida game this past weekend down in Gainesville. Visited Florida a couple weekends ago as well, but not really. There's no really connection to Florida, so I don't think he's stuck going to the University of Florida. I think he's trying to enjoy this moment. This is something all new to him. With all these offers really coming since June. June's really when all of his offers started coming through, and now getting the Alabama and Georgia offers over the course of the last week and a half. He's kind of taking a step back and looking at his options, and going to take some visits. But this is a big kid, 6'5", 290 pounds. I remember another defensive lineman that Alabama evaluated during his senior year, and he ended up turning into a pretty good player, and that was Christian Barmore. So don't worry about kids getting offered late in the process. Maybe they wanted to offer another kid after Finkley ended up going somewhere else, but this is a kid that they probably would have offered regardless of what Finkley did, because this is kind of an interior defensive lineman. Finkley more of a defensive end, but I think that Alabama probably still recruiting just as Finkley, even though he's committed to Texas. But this is an intriguing prospect. Isaiah Hastings, certainly somebody that we're going to follow very closely over the next few months, especially if he makes that trip to Tuscaloosa. So hopefully we'll have an interview with Hastings on Bama Insider a little bit later this week. I actually spoke to him last night, and we exchanged a few texts. Said that we were going to catch up a little bit later this week. So stay tuned to Bama Insider later this week. Hopefully, we'll have an interview on our site with Isaiah Hastings.
Yeah, guys, keep an eye out for it. A lot of great content coming. Hopefully, that interview coming this week as well. An interesting prospect there to keep an eye on as well. Guys, this is BamaInsider.com, the home for Alabama football coverage and recruiting. Thanks for the super chats from guys like McConaughey getting in there. $25 tonight. You're way too kind, Bone. There is no substitute for you. Making it clear there. We appreciate your support there, McConaughey. And guys, get those questions. He's going to be answering all of your questions at the end of the show. We got one in already. Hope to get some more here as we continue on, but just love getting to talk recruiting with you. And I want to talk about some guys that are juniors right now in high school. You talk about seniors and, kind of the diamonds in the roughs you can find there, but the juniors are typically the guys that are getting recruited nationwide, maybe some more of the household names. And a couple guys, AJ Harris and Jaden Wayne, are certainly household names in the world of recruiting. Talk about these guys when they're going to visit Tuscaloosa, kind of their mindset right now on, their recruitment. And does Alabama have a chance to get guys this elite?
Yeah. Although we're talking mainly about these 2022 kids, obviously Alabama is out there recruiting 2023, 2024 kids already as well, even some beyond that. But as we know, a few weeks ago, recruits in that 2023 class could finally get contacted by Alabama, by colleges throughout the country. But Alabama reached out to a lot of top kids, including Jaden Wayne and AJ Harris. I want to talk about these two guys because they're both visiting Alabama this weekend. And even though it's not a big game, it's big to get these guys on campus because, especially with AJ Harris, you got a chance to, get him on campus for this game, but also, another game a little bit later down the season. A lot of these top end guys, usually kind of circle one game they're going to go to. You can expect AJ Harris is going to be back in Tuscaloosa this season, likely for that Alabama LSU game. But, he just came out today, has the top 7. Obviously, Alabama is included. And, in the end, I think, the top contenders for AJ Harris are going to end up being Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Clemson. Those are really going to be the top schools on his list, in my opinion. And I think Alabama's got a great chance with them. Visited Alabama back in June. Really had a great trip down there with his family, and I think Alabama's certainly a top contender for him. But he's coming back to Tuscaloosa this weekend for just an unofficial visit. Then you also have Jaden Wayne. This is a awesome prospect. He is a big kid, tall, very athletic, and somebody that Alabama just absolutely fell in love with when he camped down in Tuscaloosa back in June. Came all the way from Tacoma, Washington, for this, for Alabama's camp. Look at him right there, 6'6", 245 pounds. Really likes Alabama a lot. Says that he watches Alabama every single weekend, and he's visiting Tuscaloosa with his parents. This is going to be his parents' first trip to Alabama. Came with a few of his teammates, people that he trains with back in June. So this is going to be his parents' first trip to Alabama, and he's really excited. I mean, he's texting me just about every other day, talking about how excited he is about coming to Tuscaloosa, how much interest Alabama has been showing him throughout the entire process, and all the attention that they've been, or all the recruiting attention that he's been getting from them almost on a daily basis. So keep a close eye on Jaden Wayne. I would not be surprised if he's a part of Alabama's 2023 recruiting class. Even though he's from the state of Washington, it's been a little tricky to get those kids from Washington to Tuscaloosa. But if I were to put money on it, this is a guy that I feel like they could, finally strike gold with, and that would be a big time prospect. Because look at it, number one player from the state of Washington, number 5 overall, strong side defensive end. But this is a 5-star kid all the way, and certainly somebody that Alabama wants in next year's class.
Alabama can get him. I think they can get about anybody to come across the country at this point. Bryce Young, of course, decommitting from USC a few years ago out of Mater Dei in California. Coming across, what's Washington? Just a few more thousand miles? I don't know. Jaden Wayne, though, a couple of recruits here in AJ Harrison, Jaden Wayne, you really want to keep your eye on. And as we close it out here, Bone, before we get to these questions, I want to talk about your weekly recruiting thoughts, where you feature different athletes and really something you do in there, the commitment of the week. I love this. This week it was Jeremiah Alexander out of Thompson High School in Birmingham. Talk about this feature series, some of the kids that you're going to be maybe featuring coming up, and talk about Jeremiah Alexander, such a talented kid out of a program that's now top 10 in the country.
Yeah, Coach Mark Freeman at Thompson has just done an unbelievable job, and this is a chance. This is a year that Thompson could potentially three-peat in Class 7A, which is unbelievable. And Jeremiah Alexander has been an unbelievable football player for Thompson for the last 3 years, and had an unbelievable performance this past weekend. Obviously we're keeping up with all the Alabama commitments every single week, but Jeremiah Alexander playing up against Hewitt Trustful, who was previously undefeated going into that game, and ranked number 4 in Class 7A, just got absolutely dominated by that Thompson defense. Thompson won the game 42-9, and Jeremiah Alexander had a big performance, 5 tackles. I think he had 2 sacks, 3 tackles for loss, and also he had a pass deflection that was returned for a touchdown by one of his teammates. So, this is an awesome edge rusher. I know Alabama coaches are extremely excited about him. As you remember, this is a guy that decommitted from Alabama last fall. And everybody thought he was going to end up going to Georgia, but then he recommitted to Alabama back during the summer. And Alabama coaches are extremely excited about him. But yeah, this feature every single week on Bama Insider. It's part of my recruiting thoughts feature, which people follow the recruiting thoughts. It's basically an insider report. It's everything that's going on, the very latest scoop, how I'm feeling about certain kids on the recruiting trail. But we always pick one Alabama commitment who had an unbelievable week the previous week. Guys like Kobe Prentice, Tyler Booker, Sean Murphy, all these guys have won the award. Ty Simpson. This week it's Jeremiah Alexander, so we're really excited to see who's going to be that commitment of the week next week after their Friday night game this weekend.
Certainly something to keep an eye on. Incredible series there, and really an incredible athlete in Jeremiah Alexander. One of the few kids I've gotten the chance to sit down and interview with. I'm young in this world of recruiting, but an amazing young man. And, one of those guys that's trying to get others to come and join this program as well. So check that out, guys, immediately, and go to BamaInsider.com for all things in recruiting coverage. Bone, this is our time of the show now to answer some questions that you guys have in the comments, and some really good ones here. I think we're going to start at the top. Let me get this username right. Glenn Harris, 1967. He wants to know where does Bama stand with defensive tackle prospects? We talked about some maybe edge rush guys throughout the show, but defensive tackle, where do they stand right now?
Well, if you look at Alabama's commitment list, you got one big defensive tackle on there, and Jaheim Otis, who's just an absolute monster, 6'5", about north of 350. We won't say she weighs, maybe a little bit north of 350, but I think this is a pretty special interior defensive lineman. You look at Georgia's defense, and you see that big Jordan Davis on there, who's just an absolute monster. This is kind of a similar type player, Jaheim Otis, and got a chance really be a special type of player and somebody that can make a big impact. But there's certainly some other defensive linemen who are out there that Alabama's strongly recruiting. Deion Walker, 6'7", 300-pound defensive lineman out of Michigan, is currently in the process of setting up an official visit with the Crimson Tide. So we're watching Deion Walker pretty closely. Obviously, there's a couple 5-stars that are out there that we've talked about throughout the course of the year. Bear Alexander eliminated Alabama. Walter Nolan named the top 3 of Georgia, Tennessee, and Texas A&M, but says he's still going to take some visits. Was in Gainesville this past weekend. Says he's still going to take an official visit to Alabama. Not really banking on him being in Alabama's class right now, but it's always intriguing when you see kids take visits. You just never know what may happen or the feeling that they may have once they make that trip down to Tuscaloosa. So a lot of guys that we're still watching pretty closely. There are some really good defensive ends who are out there that Alabama's still going after, including Anthony Lucas out of Arizona. So a lot of these guys still planning on visiting Tuscaloosa this fall. Curtis Perry out of Montgomery, another guy that having a really good senior season, and I think, in my opinion, has moved up that recruiting board. So we'll be watching him pretty closely as well.
A lot of names on that defensive line that Alabama could land. We'll keep an eye on all of those guys. Next up, Javarius Cole, or Matt Swaggy wants to know, is Alabama in a good place to land a Nyree White? This is a guy that I believe we touched on earlier, maybe not this show, but earlier this summer a little bit. Where does Alabama stand with White at this point?
Well, Alabama's involved. They're in Alabama's in his top 4, but in my opinion, I think Georgia's in the driver's seat. Visited Athens this past weekend. I think he really feels kind of at home down there. Just based on talking to different sources over there, it seems like Georgia's in the driver's seat for Nyree White. But he's still going to visit Alabama at some point this season. And it looks like he's not going to make a decision, anytime soon. He wants to wait a while. Going to wait till probably after the season. But like I said, got to get these kids on campus. Get them on campus. Anything can happen. So you get a Nyree White, down on this field at Bryant-Denny Stadium during an Alabama LSU game on a Saturday afternoon or Saturday evening. You just never know what may happen, especially if he spends the weekend down in Tuscaloosa, spends some time with Coach Saban and that coaching staff. Salison Series done a really good job recruiting him kind of throughout the process. He's mentioned his relationship with Coach Sal, several times, just about in every interview. So, a lot of these kids, they have a hard time saying no once they get on campus or once they start talking to these coaches. So we'll kind of see what happens. But as of right now, Georgia's in the driver's seat for Nyree White.
Fair enough. We'll keep an eye on a Nyree White as well. Let's talk about some kids from the state of Illinois, though. Anybody you're aware of that Alabama is currently looking at? A little bit off the grid there.
Off the grid. I'd have to go back and kind of look at the roster. I'm sure there's somebody out there that I'm not thinking about. Yeah, I'm not really sure right now. That's a good question.
Illinois, such a
come to BamaInsider.com and find out the answer.
James Turner, yeah. Maybe, if you can do the research for us, if you're a native of Illinois, we would love that information. But we'll move it along here, past the state of Illinois to the state of California, and a player that has obviously garnered a lot of attention, Damani Jackson, one of the top recruits in the country. Obviously, somewhat of a dumpster fire going on out there in Southern Cal. Do we see him flip his commitment with all this going on?
I've been saying for a while, that I didn't think he was going to flip, but with Clay Helton being fired, and you just don't know, what they're going to do with some of the other assistant coaches. He has such a great relationship with the interim head coach, Dante Williams, and I think that's going to be kind of the key for him. Is Coach Williams going to remain on the staff? If he doesn't, I think it's anybody's ball game. I think Alabama certainly is a top contender for him. He took a visit to Michigan a few weeks ago, and he's going to visit Alabama for that LSU game. And he visited Alabama back in the summer, and it was just an unofficial visit. So he's coming back to Tuscaloosa for an official visit. Alabama's going to have a chance with him, so we'll see kind of what happens. Now, at the same time, this is a Southern California kid. He loves it out there. Grew up a USC fan, so I'm sure he's going to be paying close attention to see who's going to be that next USC head coach. We saw that with Alabama. I was about to say a few years ago, but several years ago when Mike Shula was fired and everybody thought the recruiting class was just going to fall apart. But it held together for the most part, and one of the key recruits in that class was Rolando McClain. So keeping him on board was huge for Alabama. We obviously know the type of career that Rolando had in Tuscaloosa. So I'm sure whoever the new head coach is going to be at USC, that's going to be priority number one, is keeping Damani Jackson on board. And obviously the coaches who are there now are still recruiting him, but Alabama's got a chance. They're going to get him on campus in November, and we'll see what happens from there.
You're saying there's a chance. That means a lot for a lot of people in the comments. I know. We got time for about two more. I feel like I'm Josh Maxson right now at the Alabama press conferences delegating these questions here. But let's move it along to Jermaine Woods. How is Bama positioned for the class of 2023? We got some top recruits maybe taking some visits soon. What are they looking like there?
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned, you've got guys like Jaden Wayne and A.J. Harris coming into town this weekend. We've seen a lot of top underclassmen visit Alabama already, whether that was for the game in Atlanta. We saw kids in Tuscaloosa for the Mercer game. There's a lot of really good players in the state of Alabama for next year's recruiting class. You got guys like Peter Woods, Kelby Collins, A.J. Harris, Jalil Hurley out of Florence, James Smith, who's from Montgomery but is playing his junior season and probably his senior season at IMG Academy. Alabama's got a great chance to land him. And as many of you know, and you've seen it on social media, you've seen it kind of everywhere, Arch Manning, number one player in the country for 2023, is going to visit Alabama for that Ole Miss game next weekend. So that's going to be a big visit for him. The thing about juniors is Alabama doesn't really press for junior to go ahead and commit. They really try to wait until after signing day, either whether that's the early signing period or February, to get all these guys on board, kind of see where their class is, who they really need to focus on, what position groups they really need to focus on. Obviously, there's a lot of guys who are being recruited in the 2023 class, guys that they're talking to, on a weekly, on an every other day basis. Kids that are getting graphics, kids that are getting evaluated every single week, kids that are getting invited to games on the weekends and getting a chance to meet with the coaching staff and stuff like that. And obviously, a lot of kids visited during the summer. But in terms of Alabama just, beating down the door, hey, we want you as a part of the class, this very moment, they don't really do that. They kind of just wait it out. But obviously, there's a lot of guys that they're heavily recruiting, and the state of Alabama is going to have a lot of talent next year, more so than in years past. And I think we're going to see more kids from the state of Alabama in Alabama's recruiting class in the class of 2023.
I think you're right there. It's fun to talk about the youngsters, and we'll keep an eye on that class a little bit further away. But to go back here to I believe the class 2022, Zach Rice, any updates on him as we kind of close it out here? We'll get your final thoughts, but any updates on Zach Rice?
Not really. I mean, I think Alabama's really kind of fallen off of him after they got two commitments on the offensive front in Tyler Booker and Dane Shore. The focus has kind of been on some other guys. Yeah, they've been talking to Zach Rice, but Zach's kind of focused on schools like Notre Dame, North Carolina, Virginia. He's going to kind of stay in that area. I don't think he's going to end up at Bama at all. You see him 100% to North Carolina at this time. The offensive linemen to kind of focus on outside of the ones who are committed. Elijah Pritchett, as we mentioned earlier in the show, committing next week, certainly one of Alabama's premier top-tier offensive line targets. Julian Armella, 5-star out of South Florida, is going to visit Alabama for that LSU game. He's been talking to Alabama a lot. You also have Devin Campbell, who's a 5-star out of Texas. It's going to take an official visit to Alabama next weekend for that Ole Miss game. Cam Dewberry, who's a 5-star also out of Texas, going to visit Alabama at some point this season. Now, those two guys, I don't think Alabama really has that much of a shot with. I think that Alabama's kind of on the outside, but you never know when they come in for official visits. So, we're also watching Keontae Goodwin, who's committed to Kentucky. Big monster offensive lineman that visited Tuscaloosa back in June and plans on taking an official visit to Alabama this season. So those are kind of the main guys outside of Dane Shore and Tyler Booker. So watch out for Keontae Goodwin, Julian Armella, and Elijah Pritchett in terms of guys that I feel like they've got the best chance to land on the offensive front.
A lot of visits coming up, a lot of names that we've talked about on this show. Andrew, your final thoughts before we get out of here tonight.
Hey, just glad to be back doing the regular Tuesday night show. We did this last season, and everybody seemed to really enjoy it. Obviously, we'll try to bring the heat every single week, and like I said, I had a little bit of a change in my life with a baby coming around about a month ago. So sleep schedule, had to juggle that around a little bit, but now we're back in our home and things are going to be, I think back to normal a little bit. So I'm glad you all watched the show tonight, and please be sure to come back next week because we're going to have a lot to discuss next Tuesday night as well.
Please do, guys. And it's great to hear all that. I know there's a lot going on. Nobody works harder than Andrew Bone. Hit the like for him, guys. And please go check out the rest of his work on BamaInsider.com. While you're here on the YouTube page, subscribe to the channel. Go check out the rest of our content. A lot of stuff out right now as we get into this season. But for Andrew Bone, my name is Trey Yanity. This has been the Andrew Bone Show, Alabama recruiting on Tuesday night. Join us next week, everybody. Roll Tide.